Welcome to another podcast of the Riffle series. The Riffle podcast series brought to you by 10 Leaves.
It's really great to be back.
Today we are doing a deep dive into a document that, well, it really feels like the end of an era. We're looking at notice number 25 of 2026. It's dated February 3rd, 2026. And if you've been following the crypto space in the United Arab Emirates, you know things have been tightening up. But this feels different.
It does. I think that's a very vivid way of putting it, but you're not wrong. This notice is the formal implementation of the Virtual Assets Travel Rule.
The travel rule.
Right. And while the name sounds pretty harmless, like something to do with booking a flight, it's actually one of the biggest compliance shifts we've seen in the region.
Exactly. And just to set the stage for you, the listener, let's think back to the, quote, good old days of crypto for a second.
Okay.
The whole appeal, the original idea of Bitcoin was that it was like digital cash.
Peer-to-peer.
Peer-to-peer. I hand you a 20, you hand me a coffee, and nobody asks for my passport. It was frictionless. But looking at this text, that version of crypto is, well, it's officially over in the UAE.
It is. The UAE is essentially saying that if your value moves, your identity has to move with it. Period.
And who is behind this?
Well, we need to be really clear. This is not a suggestion. This comes from the committee, the National Anti-Money Laundering Committee.
So this is serious.
These are mandatory countermeasures.
Mm-hmm.
And the FSRA, the Financial Services Regulatory Authority, they're the ones enforcing this. They're not leaving much room for interpretation.
So our mission for this deep dive is to figure out what this all actually looks like on the ground. If I'm a user or if I'm running a VXP, a virtual asset service provider, what do I actually have to do now?
Right. The move fast and break things era is definitely over. The goal here is to really unpack the mechanics of it.
So let's start with the absolute basics, the travel rule. In plain English, what are we talking about here?
At its simplest, the travel rule basically forces crypto transactions to act like bank transfers.
Like a SWIFT payment or something.
Exactly like a SWIFT payment. If you wire money from Dubai to New York, your bank sends the cash, but also sends a secure message saying this is from this person at this address going to that person. The travel rule applies that exact same logic to the blockchain.
So the money isn't allowed to travel alone anymore, it needs a chaperone.
That's a perfect analogy, yes. Under Article 1 of this rule, whenever a VASP, like an exchange, executes a transfer for a user, they call them the originator, they have to capture a whole data payload and send it immediately to the receiving VASP.
Okay, I want to dig into this data payload because, back in the day, all you needed was a wallet address, right? So random string of characters. What are they asking for now?
It's a full identity dossier, so obviously the full names of the sender and the receiver.
Okay.
They need the wallet addresses or account numbers, to trace the transaction.
Standard stuff so far.
Right. But here's where it gets heavy. For the originator, the person sending the funds, the VASP has to include their physical address.
Their physical address?
Their physical address, their national ID or passport number, a customer ID number, and get this, their date and place of birth.
Wait, place of birth? Really?
A date and place of birth, yes.
That is a staggering amount of personal information. So if I'm sending like $50 to a friend, my exchange has to broadcast my place of birth to their exchange.
If the transfer meets the criteria, yes. Now, to be clear, this data isn't being put on the public blockchain.
Okay, that's a relief.
That would be a security nightmare. It's transmitted between the institutions themselves. But the principle is the same. The institutions must know everything about you, and they had to share it.
So any idea of anonymity between exchanges is just gone. But I did see one small bit of relief in the text. Something about the plumbing costs.
Ah, you're talking about gas fees.
Right.
Yes, the rule does explicitly state that the transaction fees, the gas you pay to the network miners, are excluded from this.
Which makes sense. You can't exactly ask an anonymous miner in some other country for their passport number just because they processed your transaction.
Exactly. It would be impossible. The network would just grind to a halt. So the regulators being pragmatic there, they care about the value transfer between people, not the toll you pay to use the road.
Okay, so that's the basic mechanism. But in banking, there are usually thresholds. If I buy a coffee, no one cares. If I buy a car, they care a lot. Is there a small change rule here?
There is, but the ceiling is surprisingly low. The regulation sets the threshold at 3,500 AED.
AED 3,500. So that's what, roughly $950 US? That's not a lot of money.
No, it's not. And here's how it works. If a transfer is below that amount, the VASP still needs to collect all the data. Names, account numbers, all of it.
So it's never anonymous?
Never. but they aren't strictly required to verify that data against, say, a passport scan, unless they have some other
So
suspicion.
under the threshold, they take the data, but they don't necessarily double-check it right then and there.
Correct. But the moment that transfer hits 3,500 AED or more, the gloves come off.
And what happens then?
The receiving VASP is legally required to verify the identity of the beneficiary. They have to be absolutely certain that the person getting those funds is who the data says they are.
That seems like a lot of friction, but I did see something interesting about domestic transfers. It looked like they're cutting the local guys a bit of slack.
Slack might be a strong word, but there's an efficiency shortcut, yes. If a transfer is purely domestic, a UAE VASP sending to another UAE VSP, the data burden is a little lighter initially.
How so?
In that specific case, the sending VSP doesn't have to send that entire dossier, the address, passport, all that, instantly with the transaction. They can just send the account number or a unique reference number.
Okay, that would speed things up, but I assume they still have to have all that data on file.
Oh, absolutely. The collection requirement doesn't go away. The data must be there. And the rule is very strict. If the receiving VASP asks for it, or if the FSRA asks for it, the sender has to provide that full data packet within 3 working days.
3 days, that's a ticking clock.
It is. It means you can't be scrambling to find customer documents after the regulator comes knocking.
Okay.
It has to be ready to go.
Okay, so we've covered the sender and receiver, but crypto isn't always a straight line. You have intermediaries, bridges, payment processors. What does the rule say about them?
This is Article 2, and it's designed to close a really common loophole. Historically, these middlemen would just claim to be technology providers.
The plausible deniability argument, we're just the pipe.
Exactly. I'm just the messenger.
Yeah.
This regulation completely destroys that defense. These intermediary providers have to verify the regulatory status of the VASPs on both ends of the transaction. They can't just pass crypto blindly anymore.
But what if the technology fails? What if the data formats don't match between exchanges? Can they just drop the data and forward the crypto?
No, that is explicitly forbidden. Article 2 anticipates what it calls technical limitations. If an intermediary can't pass the data along for some reason, they can't just delete it. They have to securely archive all the information they received.
So the data has to survive the journey, even if it gets stuck in the middle.
It has to. The audit trail must be preserved. And there's another key phrase in there: straight-through processing.
Sounds like something out of a banking manual. What's it mean here?
It basically means automation. The rule says intermediaries need reasonable measures to spot transfers that are missing info. And you can't do that by having a human check a spreadsheet once a week. You need algorithms that can flag a bad transaction the millisecond it arrives.
They're trying to automate compliance.
Right.
Okay, but this brings us to what I think is the most contentious part of this whole thing, the unhosted wallet.
Ah, yes. The self-custody question.
Right. For you listening, if you just keep your coins on an exchange, an unhosted wallet is a private one, like a ledger or a Trezor where you hold your own keys. There's no company in the middle.
It's the holy grail for privacy advocates.
It is. But looking at Article 3, the regulator seems to see these wallets as a massive blind spot.
They see them as a high-risk channel. Look, they can control the exchanges. They can't control a USB stick in your desk. So since they can't control the wallet, they control the gateway to the wallet.
And how do they do that?
If a regulated VASP in the UAE interacts with an unhosted wallet, either sending to one or receiving from one, it triggers enhanced due diligence, EDD. It's not business as usual.
And enhanced due diligence always means more paperwork.
A lot more. It's not enough to just prove you own the wallet. The VASP is now required to perform source of funds verification.
Source of funds. Okay, that's a heavy phrase. That means I have to prove how I got the money to buy that crypto in the first place.
That is exactly what it implies. Was it from your salary?
Yeah.
Inheritance? Did you sell a house? If you're moving a significant amount from a private wallet to a UAE exchange, you need a story, and you need the documents to back up that story.
Wow, what if I mined that Bitcoin in 2013? I don't have a receipt for that.
And that's where the friction comes in. If the VASP can't verify the source, or if the identity info is missing, the rule gives them a few options. They can reject the transfer,
Yep.
they can return the assets to the sender, or, and this is the serious one, they can report the whole thing to the supervisory authority.
So if I'm a crypto purist and I refuse to give them my info, the exchange basically has to freeze me out?
They have to. The rule is blunt. If a client tells a VASP to send funds to an unhosted wallet and then refuses to provide the required data, the VASP must not execute the transfer. Full stop.
That kills the idea of anonymous interaction with the regulated world. You can be anonymous on your own island, but you can't build a bridge to the mainland without showing your papers.
Perfect analogy. And speaking of islands, we have to talk about Article 5, the prohibition on privacy tokens.
This one felt like the final nail in the coffin for a whole part of the market. How does the notice even define a privacy token?
It focuses on the design.
Yeah.
It's any virtual asset that is specifically designed to disguise or obfuscate the transaction history or the token holder.
So things like Monero or Zcash.
Almost certainly. Those protocols are built from the ground up to make the public ledger opaque. You can't see who sent what to whom. And the notice basically says these are fundamentally incompatible with the travel rule.
Because you can't attach an identity tag to a transaction that's designed to be invisible.
Exactly. You can't comply with the transparency rule using an opacity tool. So Article 5 is just a flat prohibition. No VASP can execute a transfer of these tokens.
It seems like they're being pushed out of the regulated system entirely.
For all intents and purposes, yes.
So this all leads me to enforcement. How do we know this isn't just a paper tiger?
Well, the language suggests they're very serious. Usually the threat is a corporate fine, a cost of doing business. This notice goes a step further. It says the FSRA will take action not just against the firm, but against directors and senior management.
Personal liability. So the CEO and the chief compliance officer are on the hook personally.
It changes the entire calculation. If you're the compliance officer at an exchange, you are not going to risk your personal career and assets just to let a few sketchy transfers slide.
Right.
It creates a culture of overcompliance.
And what about conflicts with other laws? There's a mention of a hierarchy of rules.
Right. The notice clarifies that the main AML rulebook takes precedence. This stops anyone from finding a tiny loophole in the travel rule to bypass the whole spirit of the anti-money laundering laws. The bigger principles always win.
So stepping back, the message from the UAE seems to be, we want to be a crypto hub, but it's going to be a regulated crypto hub.
That's the entire strategy. They're inviting the industry in, but only the grown-up suit and tie version of it.
One last thing before we wrap up. What happens when a UAE exchange deals with an exchange in a country that doesn't have these rules yet?
That's the sunrise issue, because the sun rises on regulation at different times in different places. The UAE rule uses a risk-based approach, meaning if a UAE VSP tries to send the data and the other side says, sorry, we can't accept this, the UAE VSP has to make a judgment call. They have to use their best efforts to send it another way, like a secure email.
But if the other side just keeps failing to cooperate,
They might have to cut them off.
yeah.
You can't keep doing business with a counterparty that forces you to be non-compliant.
And that leads to this final, pretty provocative thought I wanted to leave you with. There's a clause in Article 15 that really stood out to me.
The reporting requirement.
Yes, it basically turns all the VSPs into a neighborhood watch.
It does. It says VASPs have to report systemic failures of other VASPs to the authorities. So if you're a compliant exchange and you notice exchange X somewhere else keeps sending you bad data,
You have to snitch on that.
you have to. It creates this self-policing network. And it makes you wonder, will this force global compliance, dragging everyone up to the UAE standard?
Or will it break the system in two?
Exactly. Will it create a fractured network? A whitelist of compliant VASPs that can all talk to each other, and then everyone else on an isolated island, cut off from the main financial system.
A two-tier internet of money. That is the tension we're going to be watching.
I think so.
Well, looking at this notice, the UAE has definitely picked its side. That brings us to the end of this deep dive. A lot to take in, but the takeaway for you is pretty simple. Transparency is no longer optional. Thanks for helping us break it all down.
My pleasure. It was a great discussion.
And to you, the listener, thank you for tuning in. If you're holding crypto in the UAE, it might be time to get your paperwork in order. Stay curious, stay informed, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.